Hey everyone! I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories of resilience and second chances, hit that subscribe button right now before we dive in. Your support helps these stories reach those who need them most. Now, let's begin. My name is Ryan. 2 years ago, I gave up my freedom to protect someone I loved. I believed sacrifice would bring my family closer. But when I returned, I was met with silence, rejection, and shame. This is not just a story about prison. It's a story about betrayal, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild when everyone turns away. When the prison gates finally opened after 2 agonizing years, the sunlight felt almost violent against my skin. Too bright, too harsh, like the world had forgotten I existed and was now shocked by my presence. My throat tightened as I clutched a small plastic bag containing everything I had left: 2 faded shirts, a worn notebook filled with desperate hopes, and a letter I never had the courage to open. My heart hammered not from fear but from a desperate, childlike hope that my sacrifice had meant something, that family still meant something. A rusted car waited by the curb. Inside sat my mother Mira, her face a mask I couldn't read, my father Tolan, knuckles white against the steering wheel, and Ellen, my younger sister, just 16 when I took her blame. The sister I'd sacrificed everything for. I raised my hand in greeting, a tentative smile breaking across my face. No one waved back. The silence hit me harder than any prison guard ever had. "Welcome home," I whispered as I climbed inside, the words hanging awkwardly between us. Mother stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched tight enough to crack. Father tightened his grip on the steering wheel until I could see the veins pulsing beneath his weathered skin. Ellen, Ellen, kept her face turned to the window as if the passing landscape held more importance than my return. The car lurched forward before I'd even closed the door properly. "So, I'm out," I tried again, my voice sounding foreign even to myself. The silence swallowed my words whole. The space between us felt wider than the prison walls I'd just left behind. Every breath felt like drowning. The drive home stretched longer than my entire sentence. Every bump in the road sent shockwaves of unspoken tension through the car. I'd spent countless nights imagining this moment, tears of relief, embraces, maybe even laughter. Instead, I was an unwanted passenger in my own homecoming. At the house gate, Father parked abruptly. Mother stepped out first, her movement stiff and deliberate. Ellen followed, practically running to escape my presence. "Wait," I called out, desperation bleeding into my voice. "Can we talk?" Mother finally turned to face me, her eyes cold and unrecognizable. "Talk about what?" "I did what you all asked," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I protected her." Father scoffed, the sound cutting through me like a blade. "Protected her? You destroyed this family." I felt my body go numb. "Destroyed?" "People whisper when they see us," Mother snapped, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "They say we raised a criminal." "I took the blame," I said, the words feeling hollow even as I spoke them. "For Ellen." Ellen finally spoke, her voice small and shaking. "I didn't ask you to." Those 5 words cut deeper than any prison yard fight ever could. The betrayal burned white-hot in my chest. "You cried that night," I reminded her, my voice breaking. "You begged me to help you." Ellen looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. I was scared. "And now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Now you're a reminder," Father said, his voice ice-cold. "A disgrace." Disgrace. The word echoed in my mind long after they walked into the house without me. I stood alone in the yard, staring at the same walls I once called home. The house looked smaller now, colder, like it belonged to strangers. That night, I slept on the cold floor of the storage room, without even a blanket to ward off the chill. In prison, at least I knew where I stood. Here, I was invisible, a ghost haunting rooms where I once belonged. The next morning, Mother placed a plate of food on the table. My stomach growled at the sight of home-cooked meals I'd dreamed about for years. When I reached for it, her hand shot out, pushing it away. "That's Ellen's," she said, not meeting my eyes. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Am I not welcome here?" Father didn't look up from his coffee. "You should leave soon." "Leave?" After everything, they wanted me gone. "You've brought enough shame," Father continued, his voice flat and final. "We need peace." I laughed then, a bitter, hollow sound that surprised even me. So my punishment didn't end in prison. Mother's voice cut like steel. "You chose this." I stood slowly, legs shaking beneath me. "I chose family." From the doorway, Ellen watched, silent and trembling. I grabbed my pathetic plastic bag and headed for the door. "No one will hire an ex-con," Mother added, her final blow. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "Then I'll create my own place in this world." No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. No one followed. I walked until the familiar streets faded into unfamiliar territory and the city swallowed me whole. The weight of rejection pressed harder against my chest than prison bars ever had. Each breath felt like swallowing glass. On a roadside bench, I met Carol, an old man with eyes that seemed to see straight through me. "You walk like someone who lost more than time," he observed quietly. I exhaled, the breath shaky. "I lost my family." Carol nodded, wisdom etched in the lines around his eyes. "Sometimes that loss is freedom in disguise." I scoffed, anger rising like bile. "Freedom doesn't feel like this." "It never does at first," he replied simply. That night, I slept near a closed shop, hunger gnawing at my insides while anger kept me awake. Every turned face, every cold word played on repeat in my mind. Something hardened inside me, a determination born from desperation. "I won't beg," I whispered to the darkness. "Never again." The next morning, I washed my face at a public tap, the cold water shocking me into a new reality. At a construction site, I approached the foreman with steady eyes. "You ever worked construction?" he asked skeptically. "I can learn," I replied, shoulders back, eyes unwavering. The man shrugged. "Pay is low." "I'll take it." When I lifted my first load of bricks, my muscles screamed in protest. But for the first time since prison, my heart felt something other than pain, it felt alive. Days blurred into weeks. I worked harder than anyone, spoke little, and saved every coin. At night, by streetlight, I wrote in my old notebook, thoughts, plans, promises to myself that no one could break. One evening, Carol found me again. "You're changing," he observed. "I have to," I replied simply. "No one is coming to save me." Carol smiled, revealing teeth worn by years of survival. "Good. That means you'll succeed." I looked up, curious despite myself. "How are you so sure?" "Because broken men who keep standing become dangerous to failure." His words settled deep in my bones, a truth I hadn't known I needed. Months passed. I moved from the street to a tiny room, from labora to small contracts. I learned skills, built connections, earned trust. Every night, thoughts of my family haunted me, not with longing anymore, but with resolve. "They called me a mistake," I whispered to myself in the dark. "I'll become proof they were wrong." And slowly, painfully, I began to build not just a life, but a future that no one could take from me. My first real break came during a downpour when the site supervisor, Javo, watched me continue working while others sought shelter. "Why don't you rest?" he asked, rain streaming down his face. I wiped water from my eyes, not pausing. "If I stop, I start thinking." "Thinking about what?" "About who I used to be," I admitted, the words washing away with the rain. Javo studied me, seeing something I couldn't yet see in myself. "Come tomorrow. I have something better for you." That something was repair work, fixing walls, hanging doors, tasks that required precision and care. It paid more, but the real currency was trust. One evening, counting my earnings, I smiled genuinely for the first time in months. "This is real," I whispered, the words a prayer of gratitude. I bought proper food that night. I slept without fear. And when I caught my reflection in a cracked mirror, I didn't see an ex-prisoner anymore. I saw a man rebuilding himself, one painful piece at a time. With time, my reputation for reliability spread faster than news of my past. If Ryan gives his word, the job will be done, people said. That reputation became my most valuable possession. A client named Sela watched me repair her gate one afternoon, her eyes curious. "You work like someone running from something," she observed. "I'm running toward something," I corrected, hand steady on my tools. She smiled knowingly. "Then keep running." At night, I still wrote in my notebook, small goals, tools I needed, better clothes, a license, independence. But some nights were harder. Memories would ambush me in mother's cold voice, father's shame, Ellen's betrayal. "They don't miss me," I said aloud once, the words hanging in the darkness. Carol, sitting nearby, answered with quiet certainty, "Not everyone who benefits from your sacrifice deserves your return." I closed my notebook with a sense of finality. One day they'll hear my name again. "And?" Carol prompted. "They won't recognize it." 2 years passed more quickly than my prison sentence. I secured my own contracts. I hired help. I paid on time. I lived simply but with dignity. One afternoon, a young worker gathered the courage to ask, "Boss, why don't you talk about your past?" I paused, considering. Because my future speaks louder. I opened a small workshop on a quiet street, no fancy sign, just consistent quality work. People came not knowing my story, only my results. One evening, a familiar voice froze me in place. "Ryan." I turned slowly. Ellen stood there, older now, eyes restless and uncertain. "I heard your name," she said hesitantly. "I didn't believe it was you." I nodded once, keeping my distance. "Believe it now." She swallowed, eyes taking in my changed appearance. "You look different." "So do you," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, the words barely audible. I met her eyes directly for the first time in years. "Sorry doesn't change time." "I know," she said, tears threatening, but I had to say it. I stepped back, creating distance not from anger but self-preservation. "Take care of yourself." And I walked away. That night, sleep eluded me. Not because of anger, but clarity. Seeing Ellen made me realize something both painful and freeing: I no longer needed their approval. "They broke me," I whispered to the darkness. But they didn't finish the job. My business grew steadily. I expanded carefully, building a reputation for quality and integrity. When people asked how I managed to build everything alone, I answered simply, I wasn't alone. I just stopped expecting rescue. One morning, my first major business opportunity arrived, a contract that could change everything. As I read it for the third time, my hands remained steady though my heart raced. "This changes everything," I murmured. Carol laughed, a knowing gleam in his eye. "No, this proves everything." I signed the papers deliberately. With each stroke of the pen, I felt something lifting from my shoulders, the weight of unworthiness they had placed on me. That day, I bought a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "I survived rejection. Now I build legacy." Later, I stood outside my workshop as workers locked up for the night. Lights glowed warmly behind windows. Laughter echoed. It felt like belonging, on my own terms. A passing neighbor nodded appreciatively. "You've come far." I nodded back. I had no choice. As I walked home, I passed families eating together through lit windows. The sight no longer caused pain. Instead, it reminded me of the strength I'd found without comfort. I stopped, looked up at the star-filled sky, and spoke quietly, "You called me a mistake." The wind answered with gentle silence. I turned it into a beginning. And for the first time since prison, I felt complete. Not because I was forgiven, but because I had forgiven myself. Success brought attention, and attention brought questions. I noticed people watching more closely, suppliers, neighbors, even strangers lingering near my growing business. Prison had taught me caution, trust must be earned slowly. One evening, Java returned after a long absence. He walked around my workshop, clearly impressed by the transformation. "You've outgrown that rainy construction site," he observed with pride. I smiled gratefully. "You gave me my first chance." "I gave you work," he corrected. "You gave yourself a future." We sat outside as the sun painted the sky in fiery colors. "You ever think of going back?" he asked carefully. "To my family." I clarified, knowing what he meant. He nodded. I shook my head slowly. Some doors close for a reason. Javo studied me, seeing the man I'd become. Pain can either follow you or fuel you. I chose fuel, I replied, the word simple but profound. That night, reviewing my finances, I realized I had achieved something precious: stability. I wasn't rich, but I was secure, and that security felt like power. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was planning. My first real test came when a client refused to pay, laughing in my face. "You think you can fight me?" he sneered. I remained calm, my voice steady. "I don't fight anymore. I document." Within days, the issue was settled legally. Word spread, his firm, but fair. I hired more workers, training them with patience, remembering how it felt to be overlooked. One asked why I invested so much in their development. Because someone once saw value in me when I had none to show, I answered simply. Late one night, I received a message from an unknown number: "Mother wants to talk." I stared at the screen, emotions warring within me. After a long moment, I whispered, "No," and deleted the message. Some conversations come too late. As my business grew, I worked longer hours, pushed myself harder. My body ached, but my spirit remained strong. Then one morning, Carol didn't appear at our usual meeting spot. The next day, he was absent again. On the third day, I learned he had passed quietly in his sleep. At his modest funeral, I stood alone, grief a familiar companion. "You believed in me," I said softly to his grave. When I couldn't believe in myself. I left flowers and walked away, stronger but lonelier without his wisdom. Back at the workshop, I made a decision. I renamed the business Rise, a word Carol used often. "This is for you," I whispered as the new sign went up. From that day, Rise became more than a name. It became a promise to the man who taught me that broken beginnings could still build powerful endings. Rise grew faster than I anticipated. Contracts came from beyond city limits. I mastered negotiation, patience, and restraint. Money followed discipline, not desperation. One evening, Tsila returned, her smile knowing. "You're becoming someone people talk about." I shrugged, uncomfortable with attention. Talk fades. Results stay. She laughed warmly. "You've changed." I had to, I replied simply. At home, I framed my prison release paper, not as a mark of shame, but as proof of survival. "This is where I started," I said to the empty room. For the first time, I considered buying land, not a house yet, but a possibility. As I signed another contract, my signature was confident and clear. The frightened boy who left prison clutching a plastic bag had disappeared. In his place stood a man with purpose. One afternoon, I received an invitation to a community event. My family's name appeared among the guests. I hesitated, knowing what this meant. This is the test, I told myself. At the event, whispers followed me, some curious, some regretful, some respectful. Then Mother stood before me, looking older, smaller, uncertain. "You did well," she said quietly, I searching mine for forgiveness. I met her gaze steadily. "I did it without you." Tears filled her eyes. "We were wrong." I nodded, no satisfaction in the admission. I know. But, she began. There is no but, I said gently. Some debts are paid in silence. I turned and walked away, not angry, not proud, just free. After that encounter, something inside me finally settled. I stopped replaying old conversations or imagining what I should have said. Silence became my answer, and peace followed closely. Rise continued to grow. We now handled projects that once seemed impossible. I delegated more, trusted carefully, and mentored quietly. People respected me not because I demanded it, but because I earned it daily. One evening, a young man approached after work. "Sir, people say you came from nothing." I corrected him gently. "I came from pain." He nodded, understanding. "How did you survive it?" I considered his question carefully. I stopped asking why it happened and started asking what I could build with it. That night, I stood alone under a streetlight, watching my workshop. For the first time, my past felt like a chapter, not a chain. I purchased land on the city's edge, not large or flashy, just enough. When people congratulated me, I thanked them and kept working. "This isn't success," I told Sela once. "It's stability," she replied. "And that's better." I began funding small apprenticeships, quietly paying fees for young people nobody believed in. I sought no recognition, no gratitude. One night, I wrote in my notebook for the final time, I was abandoned. I survived. I became. I closed it and placed it in a drawer. Some stories no longer needed updates. When I looked in the mirror now, I saw no anger, only strength shaped by endurance. Years later, Rise became a name spoken with respect. I avoided headlines, choosing influence over attention. One afternoon, Ellen visited again, this time with a small child holding her hand. "He asks about you," she said quietly. I crouched down, smiling at the child. "Be brave," I said simply. Ellen's voice trembled. "Can you ever forgive me?" I stood slowly, meeting her eyes. "I already did. But forgiveness doesn't mean return." She nodded, understanding at last. As they left, I felt no burden, only clarity. I had closed the final door gently, without anger, without regret. I built a simple home on my land. On the wall, I placed 3 things: the Rise sign, Carol's old hat, and a framed sentence I wrote myself: "Sacrifice should never erase the one who gives it." At night, I sat on the porch watching city lights from a distance. I didn't lose my family, I said to the quiet air. I found myself. The wind passed softly, as if agreeing. My story was never about prison, betrayal, or success. It was about choice. I chose sacrifice. I chose survival. I chose growth. And when the world tried to define me by my worst moment, I built a future that spoke louder than any accusation. I was no longer the boy who walked out of prison hoping for a warm welcome. I was the man who learned that sometimes the coldest rejection forges the strongest independence. And that was enough. Please don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss a new story. Tell me what you think in the comments below and let me know where you're watching from. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with friends and family who might need to hear it too.